Mm. I can feel the gin.
Alrighty, there is that. Here is the link. Feel free to post away, and I will do the same. Sometimes it's still grabbing Wayne's. It's grabbing the image from Wayne's interview for some reason. So you'll have to kind of close that. It'll have yours on there when I go back and do it, but for some reason it keeps pulling that. Close that. It'll have yours on there when I go back and do it, but for some reason it keeps pulling that. Ooh, do you have how's your volume going? Because I can hear myself talk.
Oh yes. I'm just trying to get this
on there when I go.
I'm just trying to get this link up.
Yeah.
Becca's in, Olga's in.
Yay! Hi guys. Sure. Holla. All the cool kids. Cool kids are here. All right. So while we do that, I'm going to make sure all of this is nice and clean. All right, welcome to the Social Hour, everybody. My name is Nicole York. I am a digital photographer, an author, and an artist. And on this episode of the Social Hour, I'll be talking to Jason Matias. He is an award-winning fine art photographer who has exhibited all across the United States and been published in magazines like Outdoor Photographer and National Geographic. He's a TEDx speaker, the entrepreneur behind The Art of Selling Art, and the author of the book Naked Thoughts, which released at #1 on Amazon in travel humor. So, Jason, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm really excited to dive into all of the crazy stuff you're doing and talk about just all of the rad stuff that you've got going on.
Thanks for having me. I'm always surprised when you put stuff in a list like that, it makes it sound like I've done a lot, but I haven't.
You have. I think we start to feel, because we're used to our own lives, it doesn't seem as impressive. And then when you hear somebody else list things, it takes you off guard a little bit, I feel like.
I think, but when you give a list like that, I think it gives the impression that all of this stuff is a lot. But I'm 34, right? I was published in National Geographic for the first time in I was 24 or 26. So it's this whole that time, that's 10 years of just effort with a few little things in between. And it just feels like there's an assumption that, oh, wow, this guy's he's so busy, but really I spend 90% of my time playing Call of Duty. And,
well, I don't know, man. I don't know. That's the thing. Most of the people that I've talked to, it seems like from an outside perspective, it's accomplishment after accomplishment after accomplishment, when in reality, it's a whole bunch of work and then a cool thing happens, and then a whole bunch more work and then a cool thing happens. It punctuated rather than a constant stream of coolness.
Yeah. I wish it was a constant stream of coolness though.
I don't know. I feel like it would be
stressful,
really stressful and tiring. And I feel like if that's what was going on all the time, nobody would ever be able to keep up with it. I feel like we'd just be so worn down.
But it's already tiring and stressful.
Yeah, but I think it would be more. I think it would be more.
Tiring, stressful. I think it would. I don't know.
Well, it's worse now because of all the COVID stuff. So how has the COVID affected what you're doing with yourself? I know you were still able to go ahead and get the book launched and stuff, but how has it affected fine art sales?
Okay, so no art shows. So 90% of my income from art sales comes from art shows and Eyes on the Work. So with none of that happening, I've already missed 2 big ones, Art Expo New York and the Hamptons, which I'm vaguely aware that it might still be going on a private level, but I'm just not participating in it. Mm-hmm. And then there's a local show that always pulls in a fair amount of money here, but I'm missing that too. So that's the real big impact for me, is having to pivot from doing art sales in person to doing art sales online.
Right.
But I'm still doing really well, all things considered. Um, so the pivot's going all right. Like, uh, not to just jump into business stuff, but like I'm
No,
working on
do
this
it.
whole Facebook ads thing,
Mm-hmm.
and I see a lot of shit about Facebook ads online, to sell stuff. But as artists, we don't sell stuff. We sell a very personal, um, not necessarily high end, but intimately
Mm,
luxurious product, and that just doesn't sell with all the typical Facebook ad things. So I've been trying to create an ad strategy that actually sells art, and not doing all that well. Actually, it is going pretty well, but it's not replacing $30,000 art shows,
right.
not yet. So I'm still tweaking it, but that's what I've been doing all of COVID, which is different because I feel like I spend my time waiting, just spending money and waiting. Like,
Right.
take my money, social media, and just waiting for data to come in, and
Yeah.
then does it work or does it not work? Like, it's definitely creating leads. Like, my whole strategy is creating leads, but are they
Yeah.
closing? And it's an expensive experiment.
Yeah, for
But
real.
it's only
What are
expensive
your
because I'm working
metrics?
with Bill all the time. Um, as opposed to doing an art show, which is like one-time bill, seven,
Yeah.
10, $12,000 to show up at one of these big shows. But now I'm just spending like $500 here, 600. It's just constant spending.
Right.
My metrics, on my first ad set, my first sort of, um, I guess, experiment, I had tons of impressions, which don't mean anything for those of you. That means just a lot of people see it, and I had several hundred click-throughs to my landing page, and then zero leads. I had a few
Gotcha.
people email me, so there was a few leads, and actually, if I'm lucky, in the middle of this month, I might close a giant sale based off this. But no like real direct leads, people signing up. So I changed that, the strategy recently. So I'm sort of gamifying this whole other strategy about articles,
Mm-hmm.
because um, articles are the most clicked on type of link in on Facebook based on research from someone. I have the note somewhere,
From
but
people.
yeah, from people who do this stuff. Most people click on things that look like articles.
Right.
So that's my new thing, and I had like 7, 8 leads already come in
Nice.
through this, but no sales yet. But you also have to remember that I'm at a really high ticket price.
Yeah.
So my ad set's super narrow, and
Right.
my advertising audience is super narrow, and I just narrowed it even more from 9 million to 1.7 million people,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, if I could sell one piece to every 100,000 people a year, that's pretty much what my income is based off of.
Right.
Like 17 to 30 sales, 15 to 30 sales,
Right.
depending on the size of them. So that would be awesome. So that's what I've
So
been working on at that in the book.
right. And I know beforehand you weren't really using Facebook as a way to advertise yourself, right? Before you were using it as a way to kind of gather data on the kind of people you were trying to reach, like how you could reach them. You were more looking at in-person stuff, right?
Yeah, everything was in person. And the problem with selling art is that people need to see it.
Right.
So unless you have a reputation where your work is already taken for granted as great,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to portray that online, then you don't, then you're not able to circumvent that need for people to see it in person. And so there's a challenge. I mean, I just bought 3 pieces of art from a friend, and
Yeah.
even though she's my friend, and I wanted to support her, and I ended up spending like just over $1,000 on her work, I still took it home before I bought it. I was like, I want to
Right.
really see, because it's a weird arrangement thing. It's really cool, but people can't do that, and an artist can't do that for strangers. So it's just like, how do I recreate that in-person experience?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why my website's set up the way it is. But what I really need to do is add video.
Right.
So I just need to get a bunch of work produced and then create videos with them to really, really really recreate that in-person experience online, so
Mm-hmm.
people can have more confidence in what they're buying. Excuse me. Um, so that might be my next marketing step. It's
Yeah.
just hard to have that much inventory, spending that much money on inventory and then not doing anything with it with no art shows.
Right. Yeah, that's rough, especially when the production value of production, just the cost of the inventory
It's really
alone is
high
so high. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So going kind of back to the beginning, and real quick, we'll say hi to Gavin Hunter is here. And he said, don't discredit your accomplishments. You've done some very impressive stuff, including a TED Talk. It's impressive. So stop discrediting your accomplishments.
Gavin's one of my best collectors, and yeah, he's super awesome. Which is something I actually want to talk about you about. We had a huge discussion in a Walgreens parking lot when I delivered that piece about psychedelics and perceptions of time and God and all these things. And yeah, he got me all tingly. So I really appreciate him. Thanks for those comments.
Right on. Well, thanks for being here, Gavin. And Becca said she found you through an article. So interesting.
I wonder where the article came from, Nicole.
No idea. Yeah, so going back a little bit, because we kind of jumped right into business stuff really quickly, but going back a little bit, I know for people who don't have any, idea about what your history is. So you started photography as kind of a side hobby, right? That you were just exploring and then seeing whether or not it was going to kind of pay for itself. How did that transform for you into what it is now, where you are selling fine art pieces all over the country and exhibiting and, making the bulk of your income through fine art? How did that transition take place?
It was kind of abrupt. There's a few things that went into it. So I started because I was in the military and I was stationed in North Pole, Alaska. And not that I wanted to go home and visit. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Mia. But I couldn't go home even if I wanted to, because it was just way too expensive for an airman to fly. I just went through all of my paperwork, like my old, how you keep all those old files from like forever ago, like medical stuff. In that ancient, aged folder system that I had some of my first pay stubs. And my first pay stub was $498, right? So there was no way I could afford to fly home. So I got a camera to sort of share stuff that was happening in Alaska with people who were home. And that's sort of how it started. And then I started taking these like panoramic images where I would take like my little point and shoot and do a panoramic. And then people would be like, wow, these are amazing. They're so good, you could sell them. And I was like, whatever, right? No, I can't. And, but then I got to Hawaii after I got out of the military. Instead of going home to New York, I went to Hawaii, and I actually met a literal technology barrier with what I wanted to make and what I could make with the cameras I had. Yeah. But I still couldn't afford a camera. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll just sell my work to pay for the camera, right? So then I went back to all those friends who were like, you could sell this, like this is so awesome, right? And none of them bought it. Of course. Like to this day, I don't have a single friend who was my friend before I got started, who purchased a piece of artwork for me, like an actual audition artwork. Not when they were $200, not now when like this piece behind me is $3,000. Yeah. But what happened was I started doing art shows instead. It's like, all right, you fuckers won't help me with this little bit of microsecond of entertainment you get while you scroll. I'll do art shows. But what I found was that I could sell 4 pieces or so at an art show. Right. For X amount. But it wasn't enough. So if I'm only consistently going to sell a few pieces, why don't I raise the price and then this was not really a thoughtful experiment. It was just me saying, fuck it, I'll just increase the price. Yeah. Just what happens. And I hit a new market and it worked. So then I started thinking it was real and I started going about it that way. It's like, okay, well, if I can sell, I just realized that the person who wouldn't spend $200 still wouldn't spend, $1,000. Yeah. But the person who would spend $2,000 could also spend $5,000 without an issue. But at the same time, that person that would spend $2,000 would not spend $1,000 or less on an artwork. Right. Because price is marketing, which is something I really didn't understand until a year ago. But back then I realized it without understanding that price is marketing. So I I first priced myself at what I thought my colleagues were, or my contemporaries, and then, well, fuck it. And then I thought my work was better than theirs, so I increased the price.
Yeah.
And then I sort of stumbled my way into business. I mean, that's part of the way I stumbled into business, part of the reasoning behind the whole pricing and all that. I mean, I have my master's degree is organizational leadership.
Yeah.
And which is basically a business, an MBA. So I, do all that shit into the pot. Oh yeah, no one would hire me. Did I skip
Yeah,
that?
I remember that. I mean, I didn't bring it up.
Yeah,
I remember
can't
that.
get a job. I cannot get a job. I have a master's degree, bachelor's in managerial economics, Air Force veteran. And when I finished my bachelor's, I couldn't get work. And then, so I went back to school to get my master's because I had money left on my GI Bill.
Right.
And finished that, and I still couldn't get a job. So at one point in my life, photography was all I could think of to make money.
So it looks like fate was pushing you in a direction.
Fate.
Yeah. Yes.
That's, I was going to call her a conniving bitch, but
I mean, it doesn't seem like it's turned out too bad.
Well, no, I mean, it's like I said, I spend a lot of time lately playing Call of Duty, so it's pretty awesome. It has been really stressful though, like especially on the art show circuit. You make a year's worth of income off of 4 shows, which means you spend the other 8 months not making any money.
Yeah.
So that's been a lesson in, resource management.
Sure.
And while also just sort of struggling to create cash flow, because that's the other thing that artists really have a hard time with, is cash flow and how to manage money over time. So yeah, it's been really cool. And I am really thankful that I can do what I do. But it would be remiss of me to say it was a stress-free life.
No. And I mean, to be quite fair, there is no such thing as a stress-free life, right? Like you could be going to work every single day for McDonald's and fucking hate your life. So might as well be doing something that you like doing and have the stress if you're going to have it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I can't get a job at McDonald's. I applied twice. Well, yeah. I really did apply twice.
I think you were overqualified at that point. Let's be real.
Not the first time. I was just in high school.
I feel like there comes a point where it becomes really clear that you're moving toward, and I guess hindsight's 2020, but it becomes clear that you're moving toward the place that you're at. Because when you look back on it, nothing else was open. Like no other options were open. It's almost like you're being funneled in the direction that you should be going. And even though it feels like shit when it's like, you can't, like, I can't even work at Target. Thank you very much. But if you did, then you'd waste your fucking life. Like you'd be working at McDonald's. Maybe you'd be a manager now and have not done any of the shit that you've done so far.
Owner.
Yeah, franchise owner.
Now that I think about it. But yeah, I applied for a managerial position at Target one time based on a friend's recommendation. Anyway, so yeah, that's how I got to where I am. Was that your question? I think I just rambled for a bit.
Probably, yeah. I was just curious I always find it really interesting to see for people who have gotten to a place in their career where when people first come across you, they're like, oh man, this person's so cool. And they do all of this stuff. And that's why they can do the cool things, because they're rad, right? And then you fail to realize the fact that no, they're a regular person who had struggles. And back in the day, before you saw them wherever you happened to come across them, they were struggling and they were not awesome. And they were still just trying to get by and doing what they could do to get there. And I think like hearing those stories of like, yeah, I couldn't even get a job at McDonald's in a strange way is really hopeful, because that means like if the coolest people were still struggling at a certain point, and if you're struggling right now, that means you can end up being one of those rad people who's doing the kind of thing that you admire. You just have to do it and take the bumps and bruises that, come along the way to get there. Yeah.
I remember one of the things that kept me going a long time ago was that this is a cliche or euphemism, but like all cliches and euphemisms, they don't really hit home until they mean something to you. It's just a cliche, but then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Well, the person who wins is the person who keeps going.
Yep.
And there were a lot of times when I was like, fuck this shit. I'll apply to be a dishwasher. And I did apply to be a dishwasher. But I didn't get that job either. But I took everything off my resume and still didn't get that job. Anyway, yeah, the person who wins is the person who keeps going.
Yeah.
So yeah, do that if this is you.
Yeah, don't give up. Just keep going.
Another gin and tonic.
Do it.
1 o'clock, but
oh, who cares? So Wendy says your TED Talk was inspiring, and then I remembered I'd seen you doing some YouTube video Q&As on fine art fairs or on art fairs. Mm-hmm. So it's really interesting how these different ways that you put yourself out into the world, we get to watch it happen. Everybody take notes. Jason's going to teach you how to make the perfect gin and tonic. If it tastes really bad, you can blame him and not me.
Well, the perfect gin and tonic comes from the proper tonic water.
Oh, okay.
And these are like $7 a bottle, but
now we know. As I'm over here swigging my water.
Yeah, well, there's water on my desk too. It's just not as attractive.
Yeah. Well, you got to go with what's the more attractive option, I think. So you're making a living as a fine art photographer. Were you at that time actively like taking what you had learned in school and applying that to the business side of things? Or do you feel like what you learned in school ended up only being supplementary to the kind of on-the-job training that you were getting actively trying to sell your art?
Certain concepts like cash flow and profit and loss built out over time, and the importance of networking came from school.
Yeah.
Like I tend to credit only two things from getting my master's, and one is networking, and two is the ability to do research.
Sure.
And but there's more to it than those two things when you're thinking about business. So I can mentally jog through like P&L statements for the year or projections for like, what do I have to do to make it here? And what is it going to cost me? And it's usually, in terms of business, a negative slope at first.
Right.
So it was like a downhill ramp into the jump, right?
Mm-hmm.
The downhill ramp is, if you miscalculate it, it's a long ramp. And you end up losing. Like my first big art shows, 10, 15 grand down the drain just to show up and not make a dime.
Right.
But so it was a severely miscalculated slope. But it's always a slope before the jump. So being able to jog those out in my head is something I learned in school. But you don't need to learn those things. If you're motivated, you can learn that shit on YouTube. Honestly, right. I taught myself accounting on YouTube because my accounting teacher was this Hawaiian guy who always looked like he came from the beach and is going to the beach. He was this big fucking dude too. And he would come in and just tell us stories, vaguely might say the word or something relative to a term of accounting, and then go away. But so everything you want to learn for business is on YouTube. My sister just went through a whole MBA course from a private teacher online, B-School. And Marie Farello. Yeah, Mary Farello. And that's not even accredited, but she learned all the stuff she needs to learn.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of those things I didn't need to learn in school, but that's where I got them.
So it's a little bit of a question of, for any kind of business venture, well, any venture really, it's always a lot of investment on the front end, right? Like that's where you take the biggest hits and learn the biggest lessons, or the most expensive lessons anyway, and put in the most like initial effort for the least amount of return, or at least return that you don't recognize. At least in my experience, was that kind of the same for you, that like the downhill slope before the ramp?
That's a typical experience.
Right.
And there's outliers, there's people who hit it off right away with something awesome. not just talking about art, but business in general.
Sure.
Um, and those are the ooh and ah stories that we all wish we had, right? That
Yeah.
make us feel like we're doing it wrong because no one talks about, this story,
Right.
or this, the story of the regular business person who took time.
Yeah. And it
So
needs to be talked about, I think, which is one of the cool things that has happened over the course of this show with conversations that I've had with artists, is that we've been able to kind of attack some taboo issues or some issues that people just don't talk about, like the fact that very few of us actually make our living fully off of our art. We usually have some kind of supplementary income, whether that's from, teaching or freelance writing or whatever it is, even if it's kind of within the purview of our main discipline. It seems like most of the people that I've talked to have been encouraging people to diversify, and then talking about the fact that, while they may make the bulk of their income in one area, almost all of them have had to kind of stretch out a little bit and bring in income from other places in order to do well or be comfortable.
Well, so you're a brand, right? This is you. And then you have silos of business, and every company has silos of business. Any company who does just one thing is just setting themselves up for failure.
But that's the idea people get, right? Like, especially on like online learning communities where you go to learn from these people you think are successful in their field, and they only tell you about the one thing. Like, here's how to make a living as a digital artist, or here's how to make as a whatever. And nobody ever has this conversation where we talk about the fact that most of us have diversified income streams because of necessity.
And I think a lot of the people who refuse to talk about that stuff are feeding a fantasy.
Yeah.
And they're pretty much lying, because I know plenty of successful photographers or good photographers with big followings, stuff like that, who work another job, not related, but they don't talk about it. And the assumption is created that they are 100% full-time artists or photographers. And they're really doing a disservice to a lot of people.
100%. But it makes them more likely to sell things.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have a class or you do something else and people assume that you are making your living off of your discipline only, then it makes you a lot more likely to sell workshops or tutorials.
I'm actually getting a little mad about that, and it might be gin, but it's pissing me off, right? Because it's true. And I remember
how you feel.
looking up to a lot of photographers, and then becoming disenchanted with them later on.
Right.
I remember one photographer I looked up to for a long time, one day sent me his resume to have a look at.
Yeah.
Because he was applying for it, and I was like, what the hell? What the shit is this? I thought you were, the man.
Yeah.
But, I think a lot of people understand that social media isn't the end all be all. And I think the idea of what a brand is changing.
True.
And is becoming more inclusive to like the whole life story.
Right.
Like I talk about in the TED Talk, I've had other jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't full-time making money off art until 2017, 2016. Mm-hmm. And even then it was like 40, 50 grand a year.
Right.
Which as a self-employed sole proprietor, that's nothing.
No, you're scraping by there.
Yeah, you're barely 100 grand is scraping by.
Yeah. Well, because people don't recognize the fact that so much of that money goes back into the business and does not end up in your pocket. Like, that's not how that works.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, so I think a lot of people are, and they know it too. They're selling a lie.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be a conscious decision. And then the sad thing is, at least for me, and guys in the comments, let me know if this is the same for you, but those people, if they were honest about what they were doing, where their income was coming from, I would still admire them. Like, if they have fantastic work and they're producing great stuff that I want to learn how to do, the fact that you work a regular job doing something else would not stop me from wanting to learn how to do the things that you do. If I want to learn business, I'll go to a business person, you know what I mean? But if I want to learn how to do something artistic and I admire somebody who can teach me, knowing that you're a school teacher isn't going to stop me from being interested, like, or from admiring the fact that you do really fantastic stuff.
Technically, I'm still a school teacher. I don't know if you brought that up on purpose, but yeah, so with my master's degree, I'm able to teach. So I used to teach at Bellevue College. I don't teach there anymore because they pay shit, but I'm still technically a teacher for Bellevue School District. I haven't done it in 2 years, but they send me offers to come teach and I refuse them. But I've always kept it as my backup because I thought that was my foolproof. They always need teachers.
Yeah.
And then COVID-19 and there's no one's teaching.
No one's teaching. I mean, people are teaching online. People are teaching online.
And I teach online. I have my own course, but like my safety net was supposed to be substitute teaching,
right,
in high school. But safety nets are really what would that be? Like a false insurance program?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, tying yourself to the tree and then taking the jump expecting to fly. I mean, however, I can't. At the same time, it's really hard to, like, so I have a saying that's written on one of my whiteboards that you can't see. It says salto mortale, which is like the leap into the void. And I admire that ideal where you can just be like, I'm going to go for it. No backup plan. Fuck it. Here I go. And then just go. But the reality of being able to do that is an entirely different thing. And I've found often that the people who do are either just extraordinary people or were forced into it by circumstances that they couldn't control and then had no choice but to just make things work. And I find that seems to be the case more often than not, where you just didn't have a choice. So you did the thing. And people will say that to me often as a military spouse. I don't know how you do it. I could never do that. And it's like, yeah, you could. You just don't have a choice. If you're going to stay married to the person you married, that's just what you do now. You make it through. That's just what you do. And if life forces you into a place where it's like, well, this is the only thing I've got now. If I want to eat tomorrow, I guess I better start hustling. Then you make it through. And I don't think people have I don't think they believe that they can do that, or it's uncomfortable enough that doing something else in the meantime seems like a better option. Or maybe they really just don't want to be that business person ultimately. Maybe they just want to be an artist and they felt like a business was what they were supposed to do. So they did it and they didn't like it. And they don't really want to live that life. So having a regular job is a better idea.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of maybes there.
Well, that they are. I mean, life is complicated.
Yeah. And there's always options to go one way or the other. For most people, I was just thinking back to the last time I've actually tried to do another job. Well, anyway, yeah, so that's how I started. To answer your question, that's how I started in photography. It was, yeah, I think being an entrepreneur is kind of in the blood a little bit because that's the way my father was, and I always looked up to him and thought I was going to do that. Before I became a photographer, I submitted a patent application for a stock trading software that I was creating, and I failed at being a day trader, but the product I created was actually really good. But because I failed at being a stock trader, I didn't think I had the credit to actually try to create this project, which was a tool to qualify trading performance instead of quantify it.
Okay.
So a lot of people track their trading performance by profits and losses. But if I make $100 off a trade and you make 10,000 off a trade, which one of us had a better trade?
Right.
And conventional wisdom was the person who made 10 grand made a better trade. But so I was doing the math on trading differently. and qualifying. So it's called the QTP, the qualifiable trading performance something or other. And it was all based in psychology, because I thought when I was a kid I wanted to be a psychologist because I grew up kind of fucked up in the head. But
So you've wanted to be a lot of things.
I've wanted to be, at first, some sort of psychologist. Second, I wanted to be an F-22 pilot. That's why I joined the military. I thought I was going to be a pilot, but then I got in trouble for drinking. And, stupid story. It's not even worth going over because I wasn't drunk, and I had never been drunk until I was 21 anyway. But anyway, I got in trouble for underage drinking, and they pulled my application to the Air Force Academy. But I thought I was going to be an aerospace engineer and a fighter pilot. So, so yeah, I've definitely wanted to be other things. Never on my list was photography. When I started trading, I was in Afghanistan in 2008 when the economy collapsed, so I had all this extra money, and I started investing like right after the low.
Yeah.
And I learned that investing was easy because I was making money hand over fist, but investing is not easy. So when I started switching to trading and started losing, I didn't really know what was happening.
Right.
I had a lot of trouble reversing the curve. So I came up with this program. Like, what am I doing wrong? Okay, here's what I'm doing wrong. These are bad trades. And even though they might make money, they're still bad trades. And I was making enough bad trades while still making money that my overall was still a loss. So I created a platform. I forgot how we got started here. But yeah, I started somewhere else, like my first thing before becoming. So my goal back in the day was always to be a day trader who made enough money trading that I could travel and take pictures.
Right.
I was never going to be an artist. That was never a goal. I just wanted to take ooh and ah pictures, you know?
What made you want to take ooh and ah pictures?
The challenge. The challenge to create something that other people weren't. Because I started photography in earnest in Hawaii, and I would show up at the beach or show up at this place, and most of the time there would always be a dozen other or half a dozen other photographers there.
Right.
And I'm like, how can I take something that's better than all of them?
Yeah.
So it's like the competitiveness, and so that led me to being much more selective with my photos, with what I actually produced, and then really striving for different compositions. In the middle of a whole crowd of other photographers. So the initial drive to be a better photographer was to create something different. And then it turned out that I didn't have a choice. Because if I was going to sell something, then I needed it to be something that wasn't easily replicatable or reproducible.
Right. But there has to be, so was it only the challenge of doing something better, or was there something in the creation, in the capture, in the making of the art itself that made you want to do it?
No. And
just the competition.
This goes really against what a lot of people think and say about photography and art. But the initial thing for me was the competitiveness of just trying to get better and be better.
Right.
And art for me is not cathartic. Like that, you'll see that in a lot of people will talk about how creating is something that makes them feel better. It doesn't make me feel better. I feel like accomplished when I finally get something that I find attractive and like, you know, you get that, I know that I have a new piece. And it's when I'm really excited about the finished product.
Yeah.
And I finally get there. So, and I've been doing photography or taking pictures at least since 2006. But my portfolio only has 120 pieces in it.
Right.
So I'm like super selective, and until I get excited about something, I'm not really into it. But it really was just that drive to be better. But in that sort of selection, narrowing process, and that evolution of creating better, more individual work, I think that I started confronting things that had gone on with me when I was little. Like one of the things I stress about when I talk in the art of selling art is the why. Like, why do
Yeah.
you create photographs? And for me, this isolation thing that I talk about a lot, this comfortable isolation, comes from this. I mean, we've talked more in depth about this, but just on a higher level, just this, uh, I guess, just abuse when I was a kid. This whole episode of sort of terrible things that happened, and the ensuing events that happened after that. And I began noticing that in the things that attracted me were these presentations of this inner self that I had. And I call it the comfortable isolation, where as a kid, I felt super isolated. And the thing that I'm attracted to is images that are or reflect that same emotional state where you feel isolated, but you also have your walls up, and you know that sort of protected and alone feeling. And even the art that I'm attracted to, when I walk into an art gallery, which might have started this whole process, but I walk into an art gallery, I'm like, what do I like? I always like the same thing. And there's this artist that I really like who paints these trees just floating in a sort of abstract gobbledygook of color.
Right.
But it's just a lone tree in this whole space. I'm always looking for lone trees personally because I just find them inspiring. So the photography sort of, or the art creation sort of changed from how can I be better to how can I do this one thing really, really well? And how can I find one scene really, really well? And so a lot of my work, especially all of the new stuff, just sort of is enveloped under this theme or motive of isolation and being comfortable in that space. So which brings me back to how COVID-19 affected me, which is it hasn't. It's art show. I've been sitting here by myself, just like this, drowning in social media and doing a bit of work.
So looking for those experiences with comfortable isolation, and coming to the place where you recognized that that is what you were looking for, seems like it kind of ties into a theme that seems to be common for you, which is this habit of introspection. Like, most people don't recognize their thoughts, and like most of the time we have thoughts, we read them in the background, and then we keep going about our business. But some of us have the chance to stand outside of our thoughts and recognize that we're having them and see them for what they are. And I think reading your book, which is called Naked Thoughts, guys, it's on Amazon, I will put the link in the description below, kind of gives a little bit of a hint into the way that you think and the way that you're able to even recognize your own thoughts, that most people cannot do that. And is how it seems like that's a theme, right? Like with the way that you think and then keeping track of your thoughts, recognizing those, having that introspection, and then bringing that into the art space as well. Did you see a change in your work when you realized that's what you were doing? And how did you get to a place initially to be able to have that kind of introspection? Because it seems like for most people, that's a struggle.
So there's really no way to pussyfoot around this. So, okay, here's what happened. As a result of trauma, right? Like, so I was sexually abused by a older step sibling, and then I was led to believe that it didn't really happen by some conscious actors, and then some just some unconscious people who just didn't realize the idea that they were seeding in my head. But that whole thing sort of created a semi-autonomous split personality in my head. Like, instead of having an actual like separate personality that talks to you, there's like a really intense filter between me and the rest of the world. And that filter reflects my own thoughts and then tells me what I shouldn't share in a way.
Mm.
So I've always sort of been a secondary observer, like one step behind time, which leads me to a question I want to talk about with you with God. But anyway, so leads me one step beside time, and it and just allows me to be more reflective about the things that I'm thinking.
Right.
I hate it and I love it, or I hate it and I appreciate it, but that's sort of that thing. So I've always been an introspective person because I spend a lot of time with myself.
Right.
I spend a lot of time stuck behind that sort of emotional filter that it just keeps me behind a wall, I guess. It's really hard. It's been really hard for me to describe. And that's the self-work that I have to do for me, right? To figure out how to break that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what led me down all the psychedelic stuff that I talk about in the book.
Right.
Which I've only really touched topically at the moment. But that's how I've always been. So if, for instance, my company, my umbrella company that I filed the patent under and I filed the photography under is called Nereus Ventures.
Mm-hmm.
And Nereus is the original or the first god of the ocean. Before there was a Poseidon imagined, there was a Nereus.
Okay.
And he was known for being an introspective asshole.
Gotcha.
Which is me. So I named my company after him. So Nereus Ventures. I moved to Hawaii, started a company, became a day trader with the money that I had made while trading, while in the military, lost it all. But started that company based on that idea that I was moving to Hawaii was a mixed blessing. Like I was pretty stressed out and kind of dark, in a dark place after getting out. And so Hawaii kind of saved that. But then there was also an island, which kind of mirrored the way that I've always been internally, which was not I just realized that just now. But so yeah, that's just the introspection's always been there. And then as you practice at something, whatever it is that drives you becomes more a driver, more of it's relative control at the wheel becomes more apparent if you're looking. Right. So I started becoming aware of the stuff that I was creating and its motifs. So mm-hmm. One of the things I noticed was that I was taking these seascape pictures because I'm in Hawaii. What else is there to fucking do? And I would always include these like singular. I would isolate a boat mm-hmm. on the horizon. I would isolate it even if there was many. One day someone was like, "Hey, I noticed you have some boats in your pictures, and that's really cool." And I was like, "Huh." And then it made me think about it. And then I just started looking for more stuff like that. And then it built on itself until at some point when I started an exercise that I call finding your voice, which is super important. So if you're an artist watching this, this is probably the best thing you can do for your business in a world where millions of new pieces of art are made every day, or we'll call it visual stimulation because art and visuals are different. But in a world where all this stuff is created, how do you stand out?
Right.
And you stand out by excelling at something that means a lot to you. So I would do the gallery thing, find out what inspires me or what I'm attracted to, look at my work, find out which are the pieces I really like, and then only create in those veins. And that's how I got to the stuff I create today.
Right. So for the book then, which I have to say is this really incredibly brave thing to do. And I don't know if you recognize that it is, or I don't know if you do or you don't. But the idea, I mean, I have to assume that you do just from the title of the book, but being able to be that honest and vulnerable with strangers about things that are going on inside your head with no filter is like, that idea is scary as shit to me. I'm able to do it to a certain extent, but I've never gone as far as that. So what kind of drove you to a place where you felt like you could do that, where you could be that honest with like the world? You basically just gave the world your inner thoughts and was like, here you go. What allowed you to be able to do that?
Aside from the narrator, that I'm just drinking straight gin now.
Do your thing.
Aside from the thing that I call the narrator, I shared my first naked thought in Stockholm. So I was in the airport in Stockholm, and I was just sitting there waiting for my next flight. This is after having gone broke in Morocco, because I had a big art sale in Dubai. I'm naming a lot of places right now, but I had a big art sale in Dubai, and they never paid for it. But the first big mistake that I have repeated several times since then is counting money before I actually have it. So I had this big art sale in Dubai, and I was like, okay, well then fuck it, I'm gonna go to Spain. And then I went to Spain and I met a girl, and I was like, okay, let's go to Morocco. So we went to Morocco, and then I realized I wasn't getting paid, and I went broke. So I was on my way home, and in a lot of under a lot of stress, I guess. I just finished my master's degree, was heading home to get a job in New York because that's what I was supposed to do, and I guess I was just strangely connected to my thoughts at that moment. So I wrote the first naked thought, which is number 1 in the book, and shared it on social media, and people liked it a lot, which was super surprising to me. So that kind of gave me the courage to write out more and share again. So in a way, it was the support that I got from people. But after the first 2, pretty much the support kind of left. Because getting people to read more than a paragraph on social media is kind of hard.
Truth.
But I enjoyed the process of going through the thought, of living with the thought while I did it. And I found it humorous to myself. Like, oh, I just thought that. And then I put it down, you know? So letting them became a fun challenge. And the openness is also a challenge. But I mean, I feel like people have like their heart, right? So it's like, this is their heart, and people put walls up all around their heart. And then they don't let anyone in until, you know, they meet their special someone, or they go psycho or whatever. But like for me, like this is the heart, and then this is like the middle of my heart, and then these are the walls are like way in here. Okay. So I have become able to, and this comes from dealing with this thing that I grew up with, this problem, have been able to share deeply without feeling vulnerable.
Oh, so you think what others of us might feel as vulnerability is just another wall?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
And for most people, it's a really weak wall, because considering how often they get hurt.
Right.
Right. So I share like everything that I share, like even when I talk about this like thing that happened or what have you. One of the ways I've learned to deal with my issues is I approach them from like a clinical perspective.
Right.
So when I describe problems to me, or when I share them with people, I share them in a very detached way. So the book is me being intimate and detached at the same time. Yeah.
And so did you have any hesitations at all when you're putting everything together and you're going to publish this and you know it's going out into the world? Were you like, oh shit, this is about to happen. Maybe I shouldn't do this? Or did you just kind of go, fuck it, I'm gonna do it anyway?
At the point of publishing, I was just kind of like, fuck it.
Yeah.
I wanted to get it out there because
Yeah. By the time the process is done, you don't care anymore. You're just like, go live your life. I don't come home for Christmas. I don't even care.
I wish it was that easy, but I still have to live with the whole marketing every day. But when sharing individual ones, because I've been sharing them on Facebook as I write them,
right.
Some of the things that are giving me pause are the relationship ones. When I was dating the one person who is mentioned in the book a few times, I worried about the backlash.
Sure.
From sharing some of that stuff, but then I shared it anyway because I kind of live in the conflict, right? Live in the competition. Right. I also worried about how my mom would think about it. Like when I talk about one night stands and love and drugs.
Right, right.
And then I think I worried a little bit about people's opinions, but I also remember that hardly anyone pays attention to me online. So it really wasn't missing all that much. So the few people that might actually read it might get something from it and enjoy it, and everyone else doesn't pay attention anyway. So I'm super bitter about social media and attention and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard mistress. I will say that. So then what is the impetus then to actually make the book a thing and put it out into the world? Because I know for some of us is this idea that there's a story that has to be told, you know, and it's all very esoteric. And for some, like for some of us that are honest enough, we're just like, I just want people to like me. I want them to like the things that I do. And I need validation. So I want people to tell me I did a good job. What was kind of the driving factor for taking these little kind of individual thoughts that you're sharing and actually making them a book?
My father always told me that I should write a book. Like he's repeated it several times. So there's that. I received a significantly hard and constant push from an author, Angel Cannon, who initially followed me for my photography and then also saw this stuff. And her motivation and pushing for me to actually make this into a book is significant to its creation. And then there's the business side. Like I was writing these anyway. And then, you know, like we were talking about diversified income or different silos. I want to create another income.
Yeah.
So like I have a vision board. It's a 6 feet tall piece of glass that I picked up from a junkyard. And on it, I keep there's like a graph of my different incomes from business perspective. And so I put a new line, says Naked Thoughts. Right. And I have like 5 other books I'm working on or thinking about working on. And now it's another silo, another item that I can potentially pull some income from.
Yeah.
Turns out book publishing is a poor man's business unless you make it big. But,
yes.
But yes, it is. As a subsidiary income, it's a valuable and achievable item or line item on my tax return. So those 4 or 5 things combined, it's like, okay, this makes sense. And at first, I mean, I guess first thing I had to truly recognize that I had something worth selling, right, or worth sharing, and then worth selling. And again, like Angel's the one who was always pushing me on that.
So is there less internal emotional motivation then to do it than maybe logical or?
Well, I'm extremely logic oriented.
Right.
So the emotional for me is like when I published the book, I wasn't like, yes. Like I wasn't like, I'm having a happy moment. I was like, okay, it's done. Now what? You know? Now I have to watch these fucking tutorials on how to do Amazon ads. So
yep.
So I got it and it's up there and I'm still in consistent disbelief that people really like it. But I mean, I'll believe it when it's a consistent form of income. Yeah, I grew up, so my parents always talked about money growing up. They're very open or transparent, maybe not transparent, but they're very open about like money all the time. So for me, money is something that is ubiquitous part of life, and is also a measuring tool.
Right.
How good am I at photography, at art? So, okay, well, I can pull in X amount a year. Therefore, all right, so how good is this book? Well, I'll tell you in a year or however long it takes me to sell the first 1,000 copies.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'd be like, okay, well, that's the measuring stick, because it's like the SAT test. It's the one measure that you can apply to everyone. And so I'm in constant disbelief that people like it. And I'll believe it when it proves itself. So, like you said, kick it out of the house, go make something of yourself and come back.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that measuring stick has nothing to do with the actual quality of the work.
Not true.
No, it's 100% true.
It's not true.
It's 100% true.
You have to get it in front of enough eyes for that measuring stick to be applicable, but that measuring stick is 100% a valid tool. And artists don't like to hear this.
It's a valid tool if what you're measuring is how well it sells. It's not a valid tool if what you're measuring is how good a book it is. Because good book is definitely a term of taste for sure. And it doesn't apply equally to all kinds of works. So if we're talking about a book like 50 Shades of Grey that sold a bazillion fucking copies, and we're talking about pieces of literary work, definitely not a good piece of literary work in any sense of the word. However, obviously struck chords with people on whatever term that was, whether it was like a sexual thing or whatever. People obviously were interested in the work. That doesn't have anything to do with the quality of the writing or the storytelling or anything else, other than the fact that it sold well. It can obviously hit certain metrics and other things, but that doesn't necessarily make it a piece of quality work.
Do you 100% believe that?
I 100% do. Yes, I do. I absolutely do.
I mean, you have to know your audience, right? That is a fantastic piece of literature for a massive swath of human beings.
That's what I'm saying, is that
that might be so it's a context. So there's a context to this measurement for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
Is this stupid book a fucking literature masterpiece or of any kind? I absolutely do not believe that. Like this, I've been through it like 4 times with an editor, and there's still grammatical errors all over it.
Sure.
But does it hit home for a fair amount of people who take the time to read it? Yeah. So there is context in the measuring tool, but the only measuring tool that's consistent across all the contexts is money.
Well, sure, but that doesn't take into account all of the different factors that go into deciding what sells, because it's a very rigged game all the way up. And this is not me being bitter because my books don't sell very well. This is not me being bitter.
The only reason your books
just recognizing what it is.
It's not selling well. It's because of marketing. So yeah,
100%.
It is a game in terms you have to spend money to make money.
100%.
But someone who spends money on something that's not good still doesn't make as much money as someone who spends that money and effort in something that's really good. So 50 Shades of Grey would have never worked regardless of how much money they put into it if it didn't have some value already.
Oh, I'm not saying that there's no value. I mean, there's certainly people who, there's a taste. Why did I just flub every word that I tried to say? There's no accounting for taste, right? It's an individual thing that you don't get to measure because people like what they like. And that goes into so many factors that it's not even completely explainable, from, where you grew up and what your experiences are and your worldview and all of that stuff. Too complex to get into. So people are going to like what they like. Mm-hmm. However, what they have access to, which goes back to marketing, is going to depend on whether they can buy a thing. Hi, child.
Hello.
you can go away.
I'll play this.
You can 100% go away.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good fun.
Bye.
Nice to meet you.
Uh,
Yeah, I understand the hesitance to subscribe to such an idea, but if everything had to get boiled down to one metric, the only metric available is money transferred via value.
Why? Why does it have to
Because
get boiled down to one metric?
It's the only common denominator between all the things.
But why does it need to be? Like, why does it need to be boiled down? Should that come down to what your goal is for the thing that you've made? Like, if your goal is just to have done the thing, then whether or not it makes money shouldn't be a measuring stick for what you've done, right? Like,
But that's not my goal.
that was my point.
I mean, yeah, my goal is to create this thing that people like, hopefully, but also to create some buffer between me and broke.
Right.
Well, probably my number one fear, besides STDs, is being broke. I've always been afraid of being a homeless vet.
So the motivation then ultimately, does it come back down to what puts me one step farther away from the streets?
Yeah, it's always been a driver. Like, how do you decide what you spend time on?
Yeah.
You know, I have a library full of images that are good, certainly worth sharing, but I don't spend any time on them because they don't add any value to my business or future.
Mm-hmm. And value in terms of financially.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because I've long since walked away from the idea that more likes or more social media cred is directly correlated to income.
Mm-hmm.
So I can spend hours working on pictures, but they don't add anything unless I like them to my business. So they don't get my time.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, I have 5 other books that I'm working on.
Right.
Or 4. I have 3 separate storylines, and then another compilation book with individual storylines. And if I was going to spend the amount of time that I spent getting this thing ready to publish on those other things, you know, it just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I prioritized based on what would bring value to my life. And value for me right now is whether or not I'm going to buy a rowing machine because I can go to the gym. So which one of these things is going to get me that really pretty looking rowing machine that I can stand to look at in my loft?
Right.
So yeah, it's a super clinical, sterilized way of looking at things. But here's my wheelhouse of things that I can create that create tangible value.
Mm-hmm.
What should I focus on? So Naked Thoughts, I wanted to get to 50, and I'm super glad that I didn't get to 50 because I haven't been able to write one I have like 6 different ones started.
Yeah.
And I have a list of thoughts I've had, like just individual thoughts about killing people with COVID, but but I haven't been able to flesh out a whole one. So me getting to 50 would have taken a whole nother year or 2.
Yeah.
Because I need to be in a new place, in a unique environment to sort of tune into whatever it is that lets me write those things.
Yeah.
So I stopped it at 45 and it was just like, okay, it's time to put it out.
Do you think that ability to define what it is that value means to you in that circumstance and then remove, or do you need to remove emotion from it, or does it just not exist in that space for you? Because I recognize for me, emotion is 100% tied to the things that I make. And I am definitely a person, probably just by nature, who thrives off of approval, and I cannot help that about myself. I recognize that it's there, which means I can kind of navigate it and try to make it less important to the things that I'm trying to do, but it 100% plays a part for me. And I don't know if that's because I was the party favor kid, you know what I mean? Like hey, Nikki, come over here and do the thing so people can watch you do the thing. Like that was me as a kid. And then I was in theater and everything. So it just continued. Like my value was in how much people like me. So that is 100% a motivating factor for me. And I recognize that. Is that just, does that not exist connected to your artwork and the stuff that you create for you? Or is that something you like consciously remove in order to be effective at the thing?
I think I consciously remove it because no one's ever liked me. Like growing up,
I like you, Jason.
I know you do, and I know it's different now. But growing up, I never really had any friends because I always pushed people away because of all the shit I was dealing with, even though I didn't
Right.
really know it. So the drive to have people to like me is pretty strong. Like I want people to like me, but my logical response to that drive is you spent 20 some years trying to get people to like you and it never worked. So let's just stop trying and just do this other thing. And so I remove, so the emotional part of pretty much everything I do is removed. Yeah, I'm aware that I want an emotional impact from my photography,
Right.
from what I create. And I can look at the work I'm doing and say, does this really give me, if not someone else, a tingle,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term? But my emotional investment in it is removed. But sometimes I know, I mean, I guess it goes a lot of ways because like I have a piece I'm working on right now that's I've been working on for 2+ years. It's a photograph called Endless Waltz. And it's a photograph, I've shared it before, but it's a photograph of clouds taken from a mountaintop. So I'm looking sideways at clouds.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is the type of image I've been wanting to create for so long. So I'm very invested in making this and trying to find a point at which I feel excited about this image because then I can share it. Because then I know it's part of my portfolio. But it's not, it hasn't reached that point yet, but I am emotionally, or I just feel like there's something I'm missing. So so in a lot of cases it is removed. I am removed, but in some cases I'm not.
Yeah. Do you think?
It's a really shitty answer.
No. I'm just super interested, and I wonder. So obviously, I think money is obviously a highly motivating factor. Like none of us would do this as a business if it meant that we couldn't eat. Like that's just, we would do it, you know, for fun or catharsis or for whatever other reason. So obviously, in order to run a successful business, that has to be a consideration. But I wonder sometimes if being too emotionally invested is what often makes artists shitty business people, because it's hard to divest the things that you're doing of emotion in order to focus on the other kind of less fun, less engaging parts of marketing and, you know, culling your work down to the pieces that maybe are more commercially viable, but you care about less, or whatever it is that actually makes you able to make money off of what you do. And so I just wonder if that issue with emotion is what makes so many artists shitty business people. So I know that it does for me 100%.
I think perfectionism is a crutch that people use to avoid making offers. And an offer is asking for the sale.
Right.
So I know 100%, being a teacher and an artist coach, that there are artists who willingly, if subconsciously, dive headfirst into little tasks that prevent them from doing the difficult task or the scary task, like asking for the sale, which is the big one. So for sure, I have the luxury at the moment to not push this piece or some of the other pieces I've been sort of tinkering with for a long time, push them to sale because I'm selling other stuff.
Right.
But for the person who doesn't sell anything and wants to, but still just focuses on the fact that they're not for sale or that they're not ready
Mm-hmm.
There's a point, there's a fine line between this isn't ready versus um, I'm procrastinating.
I'm scared to fail.
I'm scared. Yeah, scared to fail. And if I'm being 100% honest or introspective in this moment, everyone who I've shown this piece to, and I can message it to you right now, everyone who I've shown this piece to is has loved it,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't love it yet,
Right.
and I'm not really afraid of the sale. So I'm sending it to you right now.
Ooh.
Technology is so awesome.
I know. Sorry, everybody in the comments section, you don't get to see. I get to see.
You can screen share, I think, if you want.
Yeah, I totally can.
You're totally welcome to. But so that's the piece that I've been like obsessing over. And I've always said since early days that if I ever have a masterpiece, it's going to be a picture of clouds. I want to create, and this might be the pride in me or the sort of longing to be a pilot, because I always wanted to fly, but I want to create a photo of the clouds or of the sky only that people stand in front of and just are enthralled in and can't do anything about it.
Where did you send it?
I texted it to you.
Okay.
Or some other Nicole. Let me check.
No, you texted it. I got it.
Other Nicole's.
That's on my phone. Cool.
I think I crossed the barrier from drunk.
You just shimmied right across that line, huh? Maybe it was the third glass of gin that did it.
The whole glass of gin. I'll put lemon in it. Anyway, so yeah, there's a fine line that you have to decide on. And for the artists who want to make money, or the writers who want to make money, there's a point at which you're like, this is enough. It doesn't get any, it only goes sideways from here. Right. Because there's 3 directions you can go: up, sideways, and down. And which one are you at? You know? So I might be just at a stopping point with this piece. It may just not be good enough for what I this ultimate piece I'm creating. It's obviously not good enough, but
good enough by your own standards, by what you want.
That I'm chasing, this idea that I'm chasing. This one.
So then question, does it have to be this idea in order to, I mean, obviously you're going to have other opportunities to take pictures of clouds, right? So does it need to be the thing, or is it okay to go live its life in the journey of you coming to the thing? Like, could it still live in your portfolio while you look for the thing?
It could, but I'm stuck on the idea that it's not good enough yet. This image of the clouds that I envision has to be taken from the air. So taking it from a 13,000 foot mountain is kind of as close to the air as my budget allows. So so the opportunities to create more of these are kind of limited until I meet and befriend a pilot who likes me enough to take me up flying whenever I want to go.
Whenever.
There's a lot of variables there. It's either have the budget for it, which is you're talking like $200 or $300 a flight, or would be a good friend. And we've already talked about how good I am at making friends.
What about is there any possibility that you could maybe recreate something like this in studio?
Yes, there is a possibility. And like Becca, our mutual friend, for those who don't know, she's been sort of digging into this whole UI, creating artificial environments and things like that. And I've been unwilling to fail at that. So I've been unwilling to try. And I haven't really dug into it. However, there is an element to photography where the user, or in this case, the collector, consumer, expects it for some of it to be real.
So I'm less talking about things like UI or 3D. I'm talking about shooting a blue gel at a white backdrop and then creating smoke or heavy smoke in studio and shooting over the top of it. Because so as you're talking about that, it was making me think of the fine art series that I've done with the smoke and the nudes. And there's
What's that about?
definitely, thank you. But there's a really rad quality that you can get from shooting and lighting that smoke in certain ways. And it definitely has the possibility to like move in the direction of being something that you're talking about, where you don't have to be in a plane necessarily, but you can manufacture those, maybe manufacture those, that in studio where you can come up with something. Because I've been shooting different gels at my backdrops to see if I can get things that look like sunsets, and putting smoke over the top of cotton batting and lighting that so that it looks like clouds. So there's definitely, I mean, if you're stuck already not going up in planes, there's definitely realism and real things you can maybe try in studio to see if you can manufacture something.
There's an artist who recreated who created a cloud in a room, like a cloud, using science.
Using science. Sciencing it. They scienced the cloud.
He scienced it, controlled the humidity and the air pressure and all of these, and created an actual cloud in a room.
That's rad.
And it's just a cloud floating in a room, and somebody has a photograph of it, and it's super cool. So I have thought about that, less about doing smoke and things like that. Yeah, and one of the images, so I plan out whenever I do photographs now, I'm always looking for that comfortable isolation. Mm-hmm. And in the absence of not finding it, I'm planning ideas. Yeah. So one of my ideas is to shoot a cloudscape from the sky and put a lonely boat in it. And that'd combine my lonely boat series and this cloud idea. So composites are on my radar. Mm-hmm. But I never thought about just creating a cloudscape with smoke and lights. But I have thought about creating an actual cloud. So,
I love that you were like, let me control the pressure and the humidity. I'll make a real cloud. And like, look, I have dry ice and smoke machines. use these things. I wonder
what you need for that. I have to cover up hair as it frizzes out because I still haven't gotten a haircut since
me neither. That's why it's all pinned back. It's a royal mess. I don't know. I'm intrigued now. I don't know about you, but I'm like, what can I make in my garage? Because I've been doing this series with angels, and then I want to continue the fine art nudes, but I don't really want to bring anybody into my shooting space yet until, kind of all of this dies down a little bit. But there's certainly...
I need an image for one of my dream daggers. The other book I'm writing is called Dream Daggers and Imaginary Friends. Have I told you about this?
No.
So I'm writing another book called Dream Daggers and Imaginary Friends. And it's a collection of short stories written after my dreams, which I have super vivid dreams. I don't control them. At least I don't think I do. But they're super, like, I'll dream entire movies.
Yeah.
And I'll wake up and being like, okay, here's a new script for Spider-Man. It's kind of awesome.
Go.
But I've been writing them down, or I had been writing them down. It's such a monumental task for me to record a dream because I remember everything. I have this one dream called vagina juice.
I'm afraid to ask. It's exactly what it sounds like, isn't
it? This dream is like 10 years old, maybe like 5 or 6 years old. But just to add some lewd humor to this, I have this dream where I sell vagina juice in a crystallized form to this woman who looks like, who's the woman that it looks like? I described to you? The lady from The Incredibles, the science with the glasses.
Oh, okay. Edna
She looks like that, except she's a bookie for horses. Anyway, so I have a dream where I go up to her penthouse flat and she's sitting in a dark room with big ass glasses, and I sell her crystallized vagina juice. I've at least had that dream twice. Anyway, I never forget these dreams. So I've been writing. So I have short stories for each of the dreams. And some of them are like several thousand words. Mm-hmm. It's like a whole fleshed out thing. And I hesitate whenever I wake up from a dream and writing them because it's so much work. But I have like 20-ish, maybe almost 30 of these dreams. So I have a book that's like 30,000 words. called Dream Daggers and Imaginary Friends. And one of them is a dream called Angel of War. And I'll send it to you just for your entertainment. But it's a dream about an angel who's commanding a battlefield of humans against humans, and he enters the battle to fight on a losing side of this war, and I've been sort of poking at, I need a kind of image that'll go for that. And I was wanting to so one of my favorite dream is this one called Flying Whales, and it's also a conflict. So this might be something that's going on in my psyche, but it's like this world where humans are just a species on the planet, and there's this whole sky full of things that fly, including these massive whales that are just like, imagine a whale going over with barnacles, but then the barnacles had lives of their own, and there was like the whale became this sort of like floating warship being attacked by a storm, which was carnivorous, and then these eagles that swarm like piranha. And then in the dream, the guy, me, who I always watch in third person, sees this whale that's, every one of like the orifices that are open on it emits sound like trumpets, being attacked by this swarm or school of giant eagles. And he like grabs his gun because he lives underground, because in this world humans
it's
are
not
small.
a good idea to be exposed to the
be
air, apparently.
Surface, right? So, but he sees this whale sort of crashing down to this field, and in this world, like you have the house or this entrance to the underground, and this open field, which is a security barrier, so that anything coming out of the woods you can defend against. Anyway, this thing is crashing, this whale's crashing, and he's running out to sort of shoot the eagles because he doesn't want this majestic whale to die. Anyway, so I need a cover. So I was gonna contact, and I need to, and maybe I'll do it now. But one of these Instagram guys who I discovered who does these fantastical Ted's Little Dream. So if Ted is watching this, Ted's Little Dream on Instagram to do the cover for that. But I want to have images in this book that will coincide with each of the stories. Like I have a very Dali-esque dream where there's a circle of us surfing, and a shark came up into our circle of people hanging out on surfboards, and it was like wanting to be petted like a dog. So, but then the ocean ended at a beach, and then the beach had like a border wall, and on the other side of that wall was infinite down. But on the other side of that wall, where it was open space and open air, there were people scuba diving in scuba gear down in the open air, picking barnacles off the wall because that was their food source. So the world existed of ocean, narrow strip of beach, and then nothingness.
I'm super jealous of your dreams because mine are mostly just disconnected pieces of nonsense. Every now and then I'll get a good story, but I never bother to write them down because when I do, it sounds crazy as shit. Like I have one, I took a picture of it at some point. It was like people try to make people do bad things because aliens actually exist. Some psychological shit happening, and yeah. And then I read it after I was like fully conscious and I didn't understand what it meant. So
you wrote it down.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good
What's
point.
that?
You wrote it down, so that's enough. And then you make a story out of it.
Well, I'm more interested in writing stories about your dreams. God, they're way more interesting than mine are.
Okay, cool.
So as we near the 1.5 hour mark, I want to throw a couple of the questions at you that we have been given by our lovely commenters. And then we'll head toward the end of this. So Gary Monroe wants to know, how do you decide what art you'll produce, and how much does seeing what sells versus your own artistic taste influence that decision? I know we've talked about that already a little bit, but maybe we could give something that's kind of a little more concise.
I only add things to my portfolio that fit into my why. Like, why do I create art? Right? Because I can take a good photograph. Like I can go to that Portland tree and take a fucking amazing photograph of that stupid fucking Portland tree that everyone takes a photograph of. But I'm not going to sell it. And like, I have a photograph that's on par with most people's photographs, like 98% of people's photographs that I took with my phone, but I'm not going to sell it or even attempt to take a picture of it because it doesn't fit into my why. So first, I'm only looking for images that I can fit into the story of why I create. Now, I'm a good photographer. Like, I've been doing photography since 2006. So I have the technical skill. Photography is literally just math and computer programs. And you can create whatever the fuck you want, but that doesn't have any value to the people who are buying art from you. So I only buy, or I only work, add images to my portfolio that fit into this story of why I create. So that's how I decide what makes it into my portfolio. Like, I went on a road trip with Ali a week ago, or what have you, and I have some technically awesome fucking photographs. Like, I have these photographs of flowers with the mountain in the background, like all stacked, and I'm not going to sell it. And I know that there's photographers in this area who live and thrive off those keywords.
Oh, yeah.
Just selling the same typical photograph over and over. And I know I can bite into their business if I wanted to with this image, but I'm not going to, because it doesn't fit into the why that I create. It doesn't fit into the narrative of why I'm an artist and why I create art. And a lot of people aren't going to like this, but just because you took a photograph or painted a picture doesn't make it art. Art is creativity plus context equals art. So when you can develop these two, your creativity, your technical and creative skill, and the context in which you create, then you create something that's art. And the context in which you create doesn't have to be something broad and society affecting, like BLM, which is hot right now, or so BLM or women's rights or inequality or the financial, those are like the big, that's sort of like what Bansky does and what have you. It's a super broad field and is applicable to many people, but only few can succeed. But it's still, whatever your context is only has to be relevant to you. It can be relevant on a broad scale, but it has to be relevant to you. And if you can't create context for your art, then you're not going to create a story that people can touch and internalize. And that story is what people buy. So regardless of quality, it's the articulation of your story in which is what people buy. So when I'm adding something to my portfolio, if I can't articulate the purpose of me adding this thing to my portfolio, then I'm not going to add it. Good or not. I'll share it on Instagram. But again, Instagram, social media is not for selling your art. It's just for...
It's top of mind, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good point, and I hope people take that to heart, because there's certainly, it ties into why people buy in the first place, right? I mean, and there's
I call that gin. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I can. You're going to town. There's several reasons why people buy, but it seems to kind of boil down to, particularly now, people buy an emotion and not a thing. Right? They're buying what they get from a thing and not the thing itself. And
people buy the artist.
Right. I mean, that plays into the, yeah.
Because when people go to art galleries, they buy whatever story the art gallery sells them. Mm-hmm. But when people are buying from individual artists, they're buying because they love you. So you is the really thing that you have to be able to show people. So if you go on my website, which Nicole might link or what have you, there's stories attached to each photograph. And some of those stories, especially the older ones, are kind of broad and bullshit. But then there's like the newer pieces, you'll see like the editions, especially ones that are limited edition of 5 or less. You'll see a very personal story that people connect with. And that's what people love.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even for people who are not selling fine art, if you're a portrait photographer, it's equally important to realize that they're not buying a portrait so they can have a picture to put on their wall. They're buying a portrait so that they can have an emotion connected to whatever that signifies, like the last time you saw your father, or when your baby was still an innocent small thing, or what it felt like to be a mom, or whatever it is. I mean, that's what people are actually buying, not the paper and the ink that they're printed on. Especially, I mean, that can obviously add value, but it's the story. It's that first.
And I sell portraits too. So like 100%, that's 1000% true. Remember Jade's story when we were, I mean, not to talk
Yes.
about Jade, but it was so important that's what, I hope she shares that more with her potential clients, because that's what people are going to be connected to.
Yeah, agreed. So, and I'll just pull this up. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, cool.
I've never been on
So,
this side of a screen share.
yeah, it's interesting,
I'm
right?
always a teacher.
And so you definitely, even just allowing it to scroll, um, you get a feeling, seeing the work, you definitely can see that theme, right? That of isolation. Let me go up and we'll grab one of these. And then so here's, and this is, I would imagine, as close as you can get to standing next to somebody at a gallery show and talking to them about the piece, right? Like
Yeah,
if,
I
as
think the,
if
the
it were
one
to
thing I could
be,
add is video.
right.
Is have the work and then do a video with each piece. It's just super, super phenomenally expensive to do something like that as a photographer. But as a
Mm-hmm.
painter, I tell every painter to do video with their pieces.
So, and I know you've had a couple people in the art of selling art have done this. Have you considered doing any of the like digital shows? I know you've had a couple people who've done really well with that.
No,
No
I don't
consideration
really
for
feel like
that.
I need to. I'd rather focus on Facebook ads and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even with a digital show or a virtual show, you still need printed pieces.
Right.
So if I end up, and it is in my like long-term or intermediate plan to have some of these pieces printed so I can make videos individually of them as
Mm-hmm.
examples. Um, so if I do end up with like a dozen pieces, then I'll rent a space and record a video to do a virtual show.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, until then, I probably won't.
It's just kind of cost prohibitive.
It is cost prohibitive, but I also find it a little bit unnecessary as a photographer, which is basically makes me a digital artist.
Sure.
I can create income or I can create sales without doing this one item. So
Right.
I don't feel like I need to.
Sure. So then let's see here. We'll head back over to our comments a little bit. Becca said, I think some people's emotional investment in their own art might impact how they see artists working multiple jobs. The real job stigma is alive and well. And I think she's 100% right. Scott Ables says, I barely scrape by. I respect anyone who pays their bills. I respect teachers, especially. Being able to broaden minds is amazing. Doing that and your art, outstanding. It's, I think, really easy to minimize the importance of other things, especially when you're part of a community who doesn't value those things as much. Bobby Thompson says, how do you think the current economy is going to impact the fine art market for photographers in the short and long term? And do you have any strategy to deal with it?
It depends on who your target market is. So my target market is the upper middle class and upper class. And I have a lot of artists in the US selling art who are like, that's who I need to target too, because they have all the money, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's your target market. So before I go forward, I just want to say your target market can be whatever it is you think it is. It doesn't have to be the rich people. But the divide between the upper middle class and the middle class is getting wider right now because of the way taxes are set up, because of the way income is created for those people. And the way they've diversified their own income allows them to continue to thrive in a time like this. Anyway, so my target market, while slightly reticent
Yep.
of making big purchases, is still making big purchases. So I feel like my like ad set that I created for the art of selling art or for selling my own work would be phenomenally more effective in a non-recession time, but is obviously still effective. and is still creating leads and stuff like that. So my target market is still providing income for me. So it depends on who your market is. If you are selling mid-tier artwork, like in the 1,000 to 3,000 range, to middle-class America, then you're not going to do well right now. If you're selling high-tier or upper income or higher price stuff, so like 3,000 and up to upper class America, upper middle class and higher, then you can do well right now. If you're selling lower priced pieces to middle and lower class, then you can do well right now. So the middle market is really where you're not going to be successful. But there's a ton of people who want to support you in the lower market, and there's a ton of people who can support you in the upper market if they could discover you. However, the upper market is super particular about who you are. So having the authority in your field, having the social proof about your work is super important. So you have to make that presentation, like that gallery presentation, to the upper middle class and higher in order to sell work to them. And then the middle class and lower, you have to be able to identify with them with your artwork, and also come at a price point in which they can feel like they're supporting artists without taking away from their family.
Good point. And that's why, usually McDonald's is recession proof, because they're selling cheap shit to a whole lot of people. And then really, really expensive, 4-star Michelin restaurants are pretty much recession proof, because the only people who go there are the people who have a shit ton of money to spend and the desire to spend it there. So it always seems to be the middle market that artists go to die. Like, that's where you go to die.
The artists aim at the middle market because they lack a business direction. You shouldn't be aiming at the middle market with an upper market price.
Yeah.
Right now.
Because they get insulted. Like middle market consumers get insulted if you try to sell them really expensive.
People won't take their price.
That's true. Both sides. Yeah.
But like the reason that whole COVID-19 the artist sale, I forget what the hashtag was, but support artists for COVID-19, artwork under $200, that whole thing where there was this whole thing going on when March started, where you could sell artwork for under 200 using this hashtag, and that every $1,000 you made, you would buy another artist's work. Mm-hmm. And that really appealed to the middle class and lower, because they were supporting their friends and supporting their artists,
right,
and supporting art, while also feeling like they were also contributing to the whole thing and not just to one artist. Mm-hmm. That really worked because it appealed to a certain people. But like today, I had a $10,000 sale, $10,100.
Right.
And I worked on it for like 3 months. I worked on it for 1 month. She already bought a piece last month for $2,000, so $12,000 total. Now, I could never approach her with a $200 piece of art. Mm-hmm. It just wouldn't. Price is marketing. So like you have to know your market and know what you want to do. And I've considered doing the whole $200 market thing. I forget what it's called. You can look it up later. But I've not done that because it doesn't coincide with the narrative of the people who I'm typically marketing to.
Right.
But there's a whole market for it. Like, could I sell? Like, my idea was to sell an edition of 19 of artwork that I don't normally sell in my portfolio to the other income bracket.
Right.
And that's totally valuable if I wasn't also marketing or had a presence in the bigger one. So it's just, you can sell artwork during a pandemic or during an economic recession, as long as you pick your targets and then approach them properly.
Right.
I feel like I'm off topic, but
no, it still fits. I think what it comes down to is that this is the strategy actually any different than it would be at any other time. And it seems like ultimately the broad strategy of how you deal with people doesn't actually change. Like there are people who will buy in every bracket. You just have to know who they are, why they buy, and how you can market yourself to them.
Have your customer avatar.
Right.
For sure.
For people who don't know what a customer avatar is, what is that?
It's a description of who your customer is and how they behave. And the behavior part is really important. Where do they shop? What do they do? What do they look for? What do they think? So one of my avatars is a male upper middle class owner who loves the outdoors. So how does he behave though? Like so-and-so loves the outdoors but works a full-time job and supports his family, so is only able to go out and hike with his kids like once a month, but loves the outdoors and misses the days when he could just be free and hike whenever he wanted. That's an avatar, and you can market to that person based on their behaviors and the way they act online. That's what social media was created for, was to define who that person was and how they behave so that companies can market to them and make money. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what an avatar is. And you can define that avatar and broaden it or narrow it based on knowing who your customer is.
And do you think those avatars should be as narrow as possible? Like, should they be?
They should be definable, whether they're narrow or not. So if you just say, I like an outdoorsman, I have nature photography, so therefore outdoorsmen should be my target market. That wouldn't work.
Right.
Because there's no definition. You know, my work sells for $400 is what I sell a print for. So that price market, because price is marketing, defines the type of person you're going to market to. Right. Are you going to market to the upper middle class with a $400 piece of art? No, because they won't take it seriously.
Right. And then if you were to do something like that now, your collectors would likely be insulted and and feel like their work had been their pieces they bought had been devalued.
Unless I offer pieces that are not in my portfolio.
Right.
So every year I do a sale for all of the people I do a sale every year, which has been successful the last 2 years, of artwork for the people who basically can't afford my portfolio work. But I only do it once a year, so I define its limits.
Right.
And therefore, like, I can offer something. So it's a $200 piece of artwork for people who generally can't afford my work, but enjoy my photography.
Sure.
So yeah, sort of defining that whole thing.
Sorry, I'm not doing anything weird. We're standing up now. Because I can only sit down for so long before I start having bad things happen to my muscles.
Yeah, so speaking of super unconventional, and I know your interviews don't normally go this long.
No, it's okay.
I've had about 7 shots of tequila or gin. And I need a 2-minute bathroom break.
Go do your thing. Go. I'm going to hit up our commenters and have them get in their last questions for you. So
okay.
Skedaddle.
Thank you so much.
All right, commenters, guys, you guys have been awesome so far throwing out these questions. I will get the last few questions that you guys have into Jason before he goes. I know this has been one of our longest ones so far. If you haven't noticed, Jason and I are friends outside of, the professional spheres. So it's easy for us to fall in a conversation and kind of not pay attention to where time is going. So Wendy and Bobby, I will definitely get your questions to him. Guys, if you have any more, throw them in there now. Also, if you're finding any of Jason's insights into business really valuable, he is the owner of The Art of Selling Art, where he gets really deep into all of the stuff that he's talking about as far as, creating an avatar and how you define your market and how you define the narrative surrounding your art, how you approach pricing and where you sell and all of that stuff. So in the description, I will definitely have a link to The Art of Selling Art so you guys can go over there and check that out. And, I highly recommend it, because there are not very many people out there who are putting that kind of information that artists really need to hear, like that business information. There are not very many people putting that out there. So that'll be in the comments. Make sure that you follow that link and go check that out. And if you have any more questions for Jason, just one last time before we close everything down, make sure you get that in there now. So Kalpana, I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. I'm sorry, because I don't know how to say it. Great talk. Lots of interesting points touched. I'm with Nicole on 50 Shades of Grey, and I wish I could remember my James like you, Jason. And then Wendy wants to know, how do you decide on your customer avatar?
Yeah, so at first, I know Wendy's a new artist. She's one of the members of the group. At first, it's a bit of speculation. Who do you want to be your customer? And then figure out or decide or imagine how they act and who they are and what they do. And then you define that, like, who is that person? And then you start marketing to that imagined avatar. And as you get more data, you'll find out who is your actual buyer. So it starts with speculation until you start getting data. And by data, I mean sales. So yeah, it's a bit of a venture, a bit of an adventure when you're trying to figure out who your collector base is without having any sales to secure it. So you start there. Start with speculating, and then go with the results of that speculation and start actually defining who that person is.
Well, good point. And is it worth it to, if you're going to be doing ads on Facebook and things like that, to figure out your metrics and then trace those and find out, okay, I had my first avatar. That is the person I was thinking of when I built the parameters for these advertisements, and I'm not actually seeing any follow throughs on there. So then would it be reasonable to change your avatar a little bit and then use those kind of metrics in order to find out whether or not that is a successful avatar for your target audience?
Yeah, you have to approach it from a clinical perspective. Like, if your ads aren't working, what is it that's not working? And you have to be willing to accept that you might be wrong.
Right.
This is gonna piss a lot of artists off too, but there's a lot of artists who want to sell top dollar work but don't have top dollar quality.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about the finish. And a lot of people are finishing their artwork and calling it done, but it's not done to the refined eye. So you have to go back and really decide where your work is, where it ends up and how it finishes. And this is one of those instances where you're your own critic, but you have to be honest with yourself about it.
When you talk about finishes, are you talking about paper used, which printers you go with, framing and, like those kinds of things? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, a lot of times I see a lot of artwork from artists, and that is done, but doesn't, to me, feel like it has been completed. The presentation is not finished.
Right.
Like unfinished canvases. Or I went to an art show in Seattle before this whole thing started, and I was looking at these artworks, and they were like, to me, and this is personal opinion, but unpainted canvas is unfinished work.
Mm-hmm.
So like this artist had this something painted in the middle of a white canvas, and instead of putting a finishing over the whole thing, so it was like done, it was still like raw, and there was still unpainted canvas. And I'm like, well, this is unthought through, because in technical terms, all that unfinished canvas or unprotected canvas, because it doesn't have any paint on it, is going to tarnish, and it's going to ruin the rest of the art over time. So this is someone who hasn't thought through the finishing of their work. They just wanted to paint a wave, and they thought that they could get it shown, so they got it shown, but it's not done.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about your target market, and not only like what are you creating and is it important, but what do they see as being finished and done and completed.
Right.
One of the things that has really worked for me over the past is this whole finishing process. So when I have an artist collector in an art show and they're sort of not sure how about closing the sale or whatnot, I'll show them what it's like when it's done. Aside from having the framed piece, you get this certificate and this whole process that I go through behind the scenes of certifying the artwork and keeping the edition secure so that they know they're only going to get that the limited edition really is limited, and so forth and so forth. And they're invariably always impressed, and they're like, "Wow, you're the real deal," because the finish is there. You get across the finish line with triumph.
Right.
There's a lot of artists who aren't doing that, and it's just something that they haven't been exposed to personally and personally, and they just don't know.
So, and that's a part of understanding your target market, right? Like realizing that if you're aiming higher in the spectrum of incomes, you're looking at people who value things like the quality finish and the personal touch and the process and et cetera, like understanding that that's something your target market values. Whereas if you're trying to sell, you know, an 8x10 for $100 to a random person, there's a good chance
they're not going to care.
Right.
They don't want
right.
that COA. They don't want the tracking system for knowing that they have a limited piece. They don't care. They just want something to fit in their bathroom on that little corner.
Right.
You know, or they just want to support you.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. So, and then Bobby wants to know, do you do your own printing or do you use a lab?
I use Nevada art printers, and I have no reticence in sharing that they're fucking awesome. So I use Nevada art printers, and I use them for both my landscapes, which are produced like this one behind me, and I use them for my art pieces, my Aria collection, which are mostly painted, semi-nude Renaissance portraits. So I use them for all the things. They're just great all-around printers. I don't print my own work. Cool. I don't have the facility to do 10-foot mounting and things like that.
Yeah, that's a struggle for me. Eventually, I have a few pieces I want to print really large, and that's certainly goes into the equation of trying to decide, because that's obviously not something I can do on my own, nor would I want to. And though I have the highest respect for people like Cheryl who master, you know, being able to print their work, that is an entire skill set that I don't have the interest in like building for myself. Yeah. I would much rather work with a professional who lives that life and can direct me, because I have so many other things and so many other places my mind is. I don't know if I would not do myself justice, or I wouldn't do the work the justice I want to be able to do.
Printing is a technical skill set. So you wouldn't build your own car. You wouldn't print your own work. If you have a specific signature printing process that just isn't replicatable by other labs who produce on a mass level, then yeah, do your own printing. So yeah, I produce work at Nevada art printers, and I haven't ever had to use any of my backup printers. So I don't print my own work.
Right on. We have looks like we've got a little bit of a halt there. Oh, we've caught back up. We paused on the YouTubes just a minute. All right, guys. So we went for an entire 2 hours, and almost all of you have stayed with us the whole time. So guys, thank you so much for being here. Jason, you've hinted at this a couple times already, and I know we've skirted it, but the last question is always a very blatant, what is your why?
Damn. My why. So I wrote it down, so I'll just read it to you because I'm drunk.
So you're prepared.
I wrote it down because I wanted people to know about it, and I wanted people to be able to understand and share, and share in what it is that I do. So it's on my blog. It's published. Why I create art. And I'll just read it to you. So it's my response to sexual abuse as a child was to build wall between myself and the rest of the world. Snafu, which is a real word if you didn't know,
It
would be
is.
an understatement for the mental environment in which I grew up not believing my own thoughts. I felt isolated and I understood, and until I found art, I had not even tried to climb my way out from behind the walls that I erected around myself. In isolation, I learned that how invaluable it is to confront your demons, to converse with your ego, and to reach a higher plane within yourself through understanding. Now, outside of that shell, I recognize so many people avoiding their inner personas who were once my only company. I strive to create images of comfortable isolation, to invite the viewer into a space away from the chaotic world of easy distraction, where they can confront their inner voices, grow from their debates, and strive for those higher planes of existence that are built on the knowledge of oneself. So that's the why. Like that is the why. So when I create an image of isolation, like the idea is to create visual spaces that people can escape into. But when I say escape, I don't mean escape the stress of their life, but I mean escape the input from the rest of the world. Because we don't grow. It's like I stumbled across this idea when I was getting my master's in organizational leadership, which is a MBA plus a psychology degree. And that psychology part taught me this. And we don't grow unless we have confronted the problems that affect us in our mind. And the only way we can confront those issues is if we sit down and talk to them, have those inner conversations, those inner developments. And those conversations are really hard to have. They're difficult. They challenge who you are and your beliefs. And that's the self-work that people talk about when they're talking about self-development and going to a therapist and things like that. So I wanted to create a space where you could have that conversation with yourself, where you can look up from your desk at work and have a 60-second meditation where you just work through your issues. So that's my why with the landscapes, at least.
Right on. I hope that the people who are watching, the other artists and photographers, also kind of take that hint and spend a little bit of time asking themselves why they create. And I think they will find, if they do, that their vision and their direction is so much more powerful and stable, and that you have a lot more resolve to chase that down when you understand why you make the things that you make. So Gary said, all your interviews should involve drinking. And Stephen Smith Gallery says, interesting raw conversation generating inspiration. So I'm really glad, Stephen, I hope that is the case. And so guys, we have reached the end of one of the longest interviews so far, but I'm glad you guys were here. I hope that means that you kind of like the format and hanging out. And I realize that it's not always super directional, but I think the places that we get to when we can have a more free-flowing conversation mean that we can touch on some topics that you don't really hear photographers and other creatives talk about regularly. So hopefully that's where we went as well. So before we say goodbye, Jason, I will say goodbye to you in private, but first, just everybody who's here, if you guys find this content useful, if you're here for these creative interviews and you think that they are worth it, then if you could hit the like button, if you could subscribe, that would be really fantastic. If you could share this content with people you think might find value in it, I would really appreciate it, because the only reason that I do these, aside from getting to talk to rad people like Jason, is that I'm hoping it makes a difference for you guys. And so the more people that I can reach with these interviews, that means the more people who potentially could have their artistic, creative lives changed, by getting to hear advice from people who are living that life. So please share this with people if you find them valuable. Jason, thanks again for being here today. You guys, make sure you go check out his book, Naked Thoughts, on Amazon. Head over to The Art of Selling Art and really dive into the amazing advice that he's giving to creatives on how they can hone in and turn selling art into a career. All of that stuff will be in the description of the video below once everything is kind of finalized by YouTube. So do that stuff. And thanks for being here. And Jason, thanks for coming on.
Cheers.
Cheers. All right, guys. Next week, we'll have Clinton Lofthouse here with me. He is a photographer, digital artist, composite artist. He also is the owner of Rebel North Creative, which is a brand new advertising agency based out of the UK. And so we're going to just climb all over his work and running an advertising agency and what that looks like and working with clients and all that stuff. And then the Tuesday after that, on the 21st, Lillian Liu will be here with me. She is an amazing fantasy photographer, but she's also kind of a world-renowned pianist. She is like a smashing musician as well. So obviously lots of great content coming up. Be here the next couple of Tuesdays. It's going to be awesome. And until then, see you next time.